Johnny Depp got his $10.3 million judgment against Amber Heard, but is he going to be able to collect it, or will she find an escape hatch through bankruptcy? Let's talk about it. Winning a civil jury verdict is a little bit like climbing Mount Everest. You got it, but you're only halfway done. Collection can really be the biggest challenge that a litigant faces when it comes to being able to actually vindicate the rights that the court has given them. And part of that is just because the collection process itself is burdensome, challenging, time-consuming, expensive, difficult. But it's also because the remedy of bankruptcy is kind of always lurking out there. Now, we have bankruptcy processes for a couple of reasons. One, because if somebody is going under and you have a lot of creditors with interests in that sinking ship, it's better to have an orderly and fair process to sort out who is going to get what, so that you don't have situations where creditors are trying to undercut each other. They're cutting in line, just doing things to try to advantage themselves to the disadvantage of everybody else. And the purpose is also, of course, to give the honest but unfortunate debtor a second chance. If they've done something that is imprudent or foolish, made bad financial decisions, made bad other decisions that has left them in some financial distress, the goal of bankruptcy is to enable a path out of that hole. But notice the caveat there, the honest debtor, because bankruptcy, of course, is not intended to be a way to escape responsibility for deliberate wrongdoing. And so, as a result, the bankruptcy code itself sets out a whole list of exceptions for debts that are not going to be dischargeable in the bankruptcy court. So the one that got the attention in this particular case is in Title 11 of the U.S. Code, Section 523, subsection A6. And this is the exception for willful and malicious injury by the debtor to another entity or to the property of another entity. And so on its face, this looks pretty straightforward. Willful and malicious injury by the debtor. Well, we know Amber Heard injured Johnny Depp. He got a judgment for it. And that jury verdict said she did it with actual malice. So game over, we're done. Let's go home. But the problem is it's not that simple, because malice in the defamation context means something different than malice in the bankruptcy context. So once again, we have a specific case that deals with this situation and with the difference between malice in bankruptcy, malice in defamation. That case is Wheeler versus Lodani. It's a 1986 Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals decision. And so it involves very much the situation that we are dealing with here in Depp versus Heard. It was a defamation case filed against a public figure. A jury returned a verdict in favor of the plaintiffs, found that the statements had been made with actual malice, and the debtor then ran to bankruptcy, sought to have that judgment discharged. The plaintiffs opposed it and argued, we already have this jury verdict that says this wrongdoing was malicious, therefore it falls within this willful and malicious injury exception. Please go ahead and rule that our debt cannot be discharged. And so in this particular case, what the court did is it looked at the bankruptcy standard for willful and malicious discharge, and it's fairly strict. Again, the purpose of bankruptcy is to forgive people for common negligence, common bad decision making, instead of strictly holding people to, the bad car loan that they shouldn't have gotten, if they had known better, or the payday loan situation, that type of thing. Or even just a simple, I blew a red light. It happens. I didn't mean to, but I caused an accident. Somebody got injured. I got sued for it. There's a judgment against me. All that type of thing. These are just ordinary, innocent mistakes that people kind of make all the time. Those are intended to be forgiven through bankruptcy. But the exception is for deliberate wrongdoing. You don't get to go out and defraud people and then take all their money and claim that you're broke now, so you can't pay any of it back. So the willful and malicious injury exception in bankruptcy specifically targets intentional wrongdoing or knowing wrongdoing, the type of behavior that is willful and purposeful and deliberate. Now, defamation, actual malice, certainly can be those things. It can be a knowing statement of fact that is untrue and harmful, but it can also be reckless. And that standard in defamation means that you didn't actually know, like for sure know that what you were saying was untrue, but you had such serious doubts about your information that for all practical purposes, you probably questioned seriously whether it was true or not. So reckless behavior is intended to be protected by bankruptcy because it's a serious disregard of a risk, but it's not a situation where there is a purpose of causing harm. There's more of just a failure to abide by certain standards and expectations that your ordinary, reasonable people would abide by. So the problem in this particular case is that the jury verdict didn't specify, are we finding actual malice as knowing falsehood, or are we finding actual malice as a reckless falsehood? And that, of course, is exactly the situation that we're dealing with in Depp versus Heard. We have a finding of actual malice, but no specific designation of which type of actual malice we're dealing with. So in this particular case, Wheeler versus Lodani, the Sixth Circuit basically said, look, it could be either is the problem. When we have this verdict, we don't know if the jury found the type of wrongdoing that is dischargeable or the type of wrongdoing that is not dischargeable. So we can't just rely on this verdict. We have to make an independent determination ourselves in the bankruptcy process. And in bankruptcy, that process is called an adversary proceeding. It's going to look more than likely a lot like a summary judgment, or possibly in some cases like a small trial over there in bankruptcy. It's going to be on the limited issue of, is this debt dischargeable? And so in this particular context, it would be, was Amber Heard's falsehood knowing, or was it just reckless? Now, I think that it's probably not hard to predict how that decision would go. It does not seem at all challenging to me to imagine a world where a bankruptcy court looks at Amber Heard perpetrating a fraud over 6 years and concludes that she did that on purpose. She knowingly fabricated these lies about Johnny Depp. But the reality is that the process itself is something that is going to act as a disincentive to pursue it. It's more litigation, it's more discovery, it's more lawyers, it's more time, it's more mental space. And frankly, Johnny Depp has already gotten what he wanted out of this court process, which was simply the public vindication for the world to see, this is who she is, this is what she's accused me of. She's had her opportunity to convince the public of her version of events. Clearly, nobody is buying it. And so, does he really want or need to get dragged into yet more litigation with Amber Heard over a judgment that, yes, is part of her punishment, part of her penalty, but is not a real motivator for him? It's not, he doesn't need her money. That's not why he chose to go down this path in the first place. So, because of that, my suspicion is that if Amber Heard filed for bankruptcy, very possible that Johnny Depp would not challenge the discharge, at least not significantly. The punitive damages would probably be fairly easy to oppose, since those require generally a finding of some type of intentional wrongdoing. They're punitive, so they have to have a deterrent effect. But for the bulk of the judgment, it would not surprise me if he didn't challenge that at all and simply allowed it to be discharged. Now, I know that will be disappointing probably to a lot of people who want to see Amber Heard suffer the consequences of what she has wrought. And I don't blame you, and I'm not going to say that that is a wrong way to think or a wrong way to feel. But I just will say that at the end of the day, if Johnny Depp has gotten what he needed from this court process, and the end result is that Amber Heard gets to walk away bankrupt, maybe that's not so unfair.